What I've noticed is a lot of times your overhead, your office managers, your AP, your AR lady, your project managers, they are discombobulated. There's no standard way that you save things in a certain file in a certain place.
Yeah.
So it's always, well, I'm waiting on this person internal to the company to get back to me to show me where do I find this billing, because I don't know where it is. I haven't entered it in the system.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of those things. If you streamline that, you can free up, I've seen 50% of your overhead hours. So 20 hours a week in the US have been freed up immediately just by putting in a file structure. People can find things.
Hi everybody, Gavin Coyle. I'm the Gaffer, back with another great guest on the show today. And Josh Luebker is in the States, and he's a great enthusiasm, motivation, but he has a very fascinating background, which is the reason why we wanted to get him on the show today. And the reason being is that he's got a mixture of financial and operational expertise. And what I mean by that is he's got hands-on experience himself. He's got operational experience himself. He's got management experience himself. But he's also tied that in with a chief financial officer type service. So when companies come to him, they not only get a tactical awareness of where they're at, but they get a budget awareness, they get strategic awareness, they get financial astuteness, which is a mixture that I haven't really seen that much before. You either get one or the other. You don't normally get both together. And that's why we wanted to get him on the show, to twist and turn him inside out, to get some information from him as regards how does this operate? Is there ways that we can learn from this guy? He does have a business that he operates with his partner, with his wife, called Sulphur Prairie Management. And that's what they do. They do training in this area. They do consultation in this area. They do strategic advice and support, mentoring and coaching in this area to try and help you guys navigate between the operational and the financial risks. So with that said, Josh, welcome to the show, pal. And we're delighted to have you on the Gaffer.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, man.
No, what part of the world are you actually in for the viewers in terms of specifically?
Yeah, we're in Arkansas, so southern United States. I don't have an accent because I'm from the north, but everybody around me has an accent.
Yeah, and you've just recently been through the presidential election, so we won't go there for this podcast, because that's a podcast, nothing got to do with this podcast.
Yep.
But no, delighted to have you on the show, and I'm really interested to get under the bonnet with yourself. But let's give the listeners and the viewers a background about you, like, you know, an interesting career path within construction. So maybe you might give us a bit of insight on that.
Yeah, so I started out at a Google data center and I had no experience. I don't have a background in construction at all. I'm really efficient with a computer, so they gave me an opportunity to do project management. But when I got to that point, they wanted me to get my apprenticeship. They wanted me to learn electrical work because you have to know what you're managing. So got into that. I have my master electrical license now. And I've worked for some massive companies, billion-dollar companies that do cost coding and all the financial stuff very well. But at the same time, I've done the work. I understand what it's like to pull wire, what it's like to install gear, what the constraints are, and how the field perceives the office. So whereas a lot of business, what I've noticed is a lot of business consultants are business people, MBAs, and they know general business things. There's a lot of differences for construction specifically. You just look at billing alone and you have progress billing, and no other industry is their progress billing. So I thought I'd marry the two together, use my background as a subcontractor to help teach other subcontractors, because most of the time in the US anyway, they are blue collar people that are really good at what they do, but they don't know how to manage the money. They don't know how to bill. They don't know how to do change orders. They can just read drawings and put stuff in.
Yeah, it intrigues me that you were able to grasp that side of the business very quick, because a lot of project managers, and I know you've had a lot of roles in project management.
Yeah,
They They generally
most of my
are good
background.
at. They generally like might be very good at on the ground or with the guys or face to face with the client and very good interpersonal skills. But then you might find that they lack on the admin or maybe the overall strategic plan or maybe even the financials. Where did this come from with you? Is it's just natural that you just picked that up, or is there a background that we don't know about?
I'm very type A. I'm a check the box kind of guy. So when I worked for these big companies, they have processes. This is how you bill. This is what we want to see. And then I realized when I went to smaller companies later on in my career that they had none of those in place. And so when I would do it inherently, the leadership would come to me and say, hey, can you teach everybody else how to do this because you do it well? And that kind of it clicked in my brain. Okay, this is something that is scalable for anybody to use and it's helpful. So that way small businesses, anybody up to 50 million can grow and use these because it's what's normally missing.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of process and systems, and I only had this conversation in the last 24 hours where things were missed on a particular project that I was involved in, and when I asked the question about, everybody had this big stunned look on their face when they seen the invoice coming through, and it was like, well, why would you be surprised if you don't have proper systems and processes in place to manage that sort of ripple effect? And then by the time it comes to the avalanche, it's too late. And then everybody's looking at each other going, I'm not paying that. We can't pay that. We don't have the budget for that. It's too late. But I think there is an element of in construction that if people are not brought into a process, and I mean by if you bring in subcontractors and you don't set the discipline for them that there's a structure here. Just to let you know, we've got standards and we've got a structure here and a process. So you can't just, talk to Harry and Harry tells you, change all the lights without a proper system coming in place. And I know that's a very simple version of what I'm talking about here, but everything has a knock-on effect cost.
Yeah.
In terms of the project management, was there anything that you pulled out of that experience that can give us some insights as regards good lessons learned for maybe a small, medium-sized contractor starting off or in the middle of things?
A lot of times what I see are smaller businesses don't want to have that corporate feel. They think that when you make a process, it's going to make you into this big conglomerate that nobody's family anymore. But what it really does is it helps your clients, your general contractors or your owners have that consistency from project to project. A lot of times I would see a project manager would do really well with a client. They would win another job with that client and a different project manager would be put in place and then the project would tank.
Yeah.
It's because there was a lot of expectations of, hey, the last project manager did it this way. Yeah. And general contractors, since I work with subcontractors, like to assume, oh, that must be their processes, their systems, but really it's just the PM. So when you, as a small business, that's one of the first things you can do is just put in little things like, hey, this is how you enter a purchase order. This is how we want to order everything up front. And that way it's stored and ready to go so we can do the work tomorrow. And have a checklist. That way people can always go back to it.
I see. Would you do a gap analysis? So say, for example, if I came to you and I said, I'm Gavin Coyle Roofing, I've got 15 carpenters working for me and I don't have any systems and processes, but, we have a way of doing things and everybody knows that such and such a person does the ordering, such and such a person does the management, such and such a person does the HR or whatever.
Yeah.
So give me your sort of go-to on a gap analysis of a company when they first engage with you and say, hey, Josh, we think we need to get more manners on what we're doing here.
The first thing I do is I ask about like their storage for material or their files, right? What I've noticed is a lot of times your overhead, your office managers, your AP, your AR lady, your project managers, they are discombobulated. There's no standard way that you save things in a certain file in a certain place.
Yeah.
So it's always, well, I'm waiting on this person internal to the company to get back to me to show me where do I find this billing, because I don't know where it is. I haven't entered it in the system.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of those things. If you streamline that, you can free up, I've seen 50% of your overhead hours. So 20 hours a week in the US have been freed up immediately just by putting in file structure. The people can find things. Then the next thing I look at is, do you have any processes? I know everybody says this person does this and everybody knows how to do this. But when you hire somebody, if you have it documented, if you have screenshots, where you click, what you type in, how you name things, then if somebody goes on vacation, you might only have one accounting lady, but anybody can fill in and do what she did or he did because you have it documented. And you're not waiting a week or two. If they go on sick leave, maternity leave, you don't have to replace these people because you have it documented.
Yeah.
And that's the consistency. And it's crazy how more efficient you can be.
Is there a general storage facility like Google Drive or Dropbox or whatever that you tend to encourage them to use, or do you just see what they have and see what they're connected to and then work with what they have?
Yeah, it really doesn't matter to me. Yeah, I look at what they have because some people have their own servers. They've invested in that, and that's great. We can use VPN and get everybody on the same page. Or you can use Google Drive. That's what I use. That's what I had to use at Google. So when you think about a $300 million electrical project, which was like a $1.5 billion project, we use Google Drive. It's not like it's inconceivable. It's not, it's not worse than anything else, and it's secure. It basically comes down to having a flow of this goes from estimating. These are the folders they use. And then it gets transferred to this one. And this is what it looks like in project management. And then this is what it looks like in warranty or service. That way everybody has the same information and they don't have to ask what happened here.
I suppose I can hear people screaming at the analyst and saying, ask them the very fundamental question when it comes to that is what happens when people start using this as a dumping ground, which is what happens normally. Like, well, if I don't know what to do with it, I'll just throw it on Google Drive and somebody else will figure it out.
What I found is it's the opposite for me. I've seen so many people that just put it on their desktop. They're like, oh, this is just something I want. Right, this is my takeoff. I don't want everybody else to see what I did, so I'll put it on my my desktop. Yeah, and then you go to a job site and you're like, "Hey, the project manager. I've done this before. This is why I know it's a problem. I had it on my computer. I call my project engineer, my APM. Hey, can you order this stuff? And they're looking for hours. I can't find it. I don't know where your takeoff is. So then I'm like, oh, well, crap. It's on my computer. It's my problem. I could have solved that if I would have followed my own process.
Yeah. And this is not rocket science stuff. Like this is 101 basics in terms of, I'm glad that you said it because it's a fundamental, just like, let's just start small and agree that if you have a shared open source communication system that everybody can tap into, and you might have layers of user visibility and user access, and that's fine too. And I think that's probably, mapping that is probably the challenge is how do you map it correctly so that you allow for all the different departments to be accounted for and then people have their own permissions and then that's mapped. Once it's mapped, I'd imagine in most cases what I've seen is that's it done. You don't really have to go back and change it that much.
And that's what I like to do, like as the COO side. It's a lot of consultants will say, hey, you need to do this. You need to put in place a file structure. But then they're like, okay, your homework for next week is put in place the file structure and we'll talk again next week. I actually do it for people because, people pay for people to help them. They don't pay to be told what to do. Anybody can go to YouTube or Google it. And it sounds so stupid and rudimentary. But an owner of a company doesn't have time to go make file structures.
I love that you said that, but I'm now starting to think that you have a bit of OCD as well.
Yeah, it's the OCD and the Type A. I'm like, if you just have it,
But are you finding? Sorry to cut across you, Josh, but are you finding when you're speaking to most of the clients, are they still dealing with the hard copy files and the A4 lever? arch folders, or like, are we still at the stage where there's MDF shelves everywhere with folders, nicely labeled, granted, but nothing in digital format?
I've seen both. It depends. The field, notorious for that. That's where you see a lot of superintendents will save everything on their desktop, and then they'll say, hey, I need you to order all this material that I already figured out what you need. And it's like, okay, I don't have that. Yeah. So you were asking earlier, do people just have a dumping ground? I don't think that's a problem. I think what the problem is you don't name it right. So whenever I do, like, for example, just a takeoff, I put my initials, I put the date I did it, and I put what it is, what takeoff I actually did. And then I leave it in the folder with all the takeoff. So that way, if I ever go back and I'm like, hey, why did I order short? When did I order it? Why did I order it short? Because your file will, anytime you open it, it'll automatically update the date, right? But I want to know, when did I do it? Those are little things, right? Yeah.
No, even like, and I have a thing about this as well. When you use your phone and you have it connected to your Google Drive, and it is automatically buffering to the cloud. So if you want to save a document from your phone, there's something in the behavioral concept that says, I still don't trust that went from the phone to the, to the cloud. Yeah. And like, honestly, there is a sort of bias where you're just like, no, there's no way that went. I have to double up and actually send it again or upload it again when I get back to the office.
I've done that before too.
That's one for me, anyway. But no, I definitely, and I think what about having an overall champion for the system that says, right, look, in a corporate world, the QA, QC, quality manager, someone that has an overview of the overall system, that has a champion of the system. Yeah. Would you define that in the early stages, or you just let them loose and then find its own feet?
No, I think it's important to have somebody oversee it, but I think it should be such a small part of their job, because everybody needs to have their own buy-in, right? Yeah. Every project, it's easy when you do it from the start. It's hard when you don't, and then you're trying to go fix it. Yeah. Right. It's the same with accounting. It's harder to go do a forensic accounting and figure out, where did I lose money halfway through a job or the end of a job if you change accounting systems. But if you did it right the whole time, at any point in that project, you can look and say, hey, this is what's happening. I need to adjust today so I don't lose money in a week or two. Yeah.
Well, so another challenging question that has always bugged me in this whole process of setting up a system is, do you have a parallel system for live projects and then another system for the generic side of the business, the generic documentation, the generic procedures, the generic policies? But then when you have a project that's actually started or ongoing or whatever, that you don't mix the two, because one is dynamic and the other is static. Or what's your take on that?
Man, we're getting granular, but I'll tell you how I do it. So I start with, I always begin with the end in mind, like a Stephen Covey principle. I start with, what do I want this system to do? And I want to see everything. So like you said, I want to give certain people permissions. Certain people don't want to have permissions for certain things. Yeah. So I don't want my field to have permission to the files, like how to do everything on the office side, but I want them to have it on the field side. So I start with all the high level things. You make a folder for processes in the office. You make a folder for processes in the field, and you make a field for a label for projects. And then within projects, you make it for estimating, active, and trying to think of the word. When it's all done, you want to have like a warranty or a service one, and then like an archive.
Like an archive.
So that way you can move them from one to the next. You can just move all the files over, and then your service department can have access to just the service files. And when it's done, it'll get archived. Yeah. So, but that way you even have a process to know, hey, when does this warranty end? And it gets moved at the end of that warranty.
Yeah. Yeah. Or retention, if there's retention due or whatever. That's right. Once that time comes. And look, I'm sorry for getting granular on you, but
you're fine.
I think that, I think that nails it. You've got the static, that's the known knowns, as one of your famous politicians says, and then you have the dynamics, which is the projects, the live stuff. And then you have the archive. So if you wanted to break it down, static, dynamic, and archive would probably be the 3 tiers in a very, basic format.
Yeah.
So like there should be no challenge for this for any size of a company. If you're listening to this, there should be no person, whether it's an independent trade guy, thinking, these guys are talking in the millions. This is like 101 basic stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. I set all this up and, I just started my business a year ago. It's just, it's replicable. So a lot of times people will think I have to remake all of the file structure and do all of that. What I do is I make a template job folder that has all the updated schedule of values, contract review forms, change orders, all of that are blank. Yeah. And then you copy that whole job folder, make a new one, and name that folder. And now you still have your template that's consistent with everything else. And it took you 3 seconds instead of 3 hours.
Yeah. So tell me this then. Get into the finance, and now we've I think we've parked a good bit on the operations side of things in terms of process and systems. Talk to me about how do you link the whole finance with your model that you offer in terms of your business and your strategy?
So no matter what you do, both of them are the same thing, right? The way that your project managers do anything when it comes to cost coding, buying material, doing labor, moving people from job to job, you also have to link that to your financials. Otherwise, it's not going to make sense, right? So the reason I do both is because we make processes that don't double up on work. I hated seeing companies that were like, okay, this is the admins doing this, and they're going to put the time in. But if the project manager ever wants to see time, they have to do it their own way, or they have to ask the superintendent, and they have to look through timesheets. But if you scan the timesheet in, it gets saved to this place. Everybody can access it and look at it at the same time. And when you start to do that whole process in the other way, is this approved for me to pay the vendor if you do the project or the purchase order instead of instead of like a will call, instead of going to pick it up, then I can track where am I at in this job, or is it committed or is it not committed, instead of a lot of times you look at QuickBooks. I have a $5 million project. I've spent $2.5 million. I think I'm 50% done, but what 50% did I spend it on? Was it labor? Did I even pay for my material yet? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's where we try to make it easy so owners can just pull up a report, look at it in 30 seconds and know what's going on, instead of half a day trying to decipher everything.
Yeah, it's a big issue. And the other thing is we're leaving fingerprints behind us that we're not challenging. So stuff that you can go back in. So I would imagine if you went into a company, you can go into the historical data and start seeing where the gaps were and where the leakages are in terms of money. Yep. So what's the common leakage? Show me where's the common holes that you find when you go back into these companies. Yeah. Where are they losing money, Josh?
What I've noticed is, and anybody who's a business owner will kind of feel this, but they won't be able to tangibly show you numbers, right? But like field is a big one. I had the civil contractor I work with, or I have worked with for 2.5 years now. He his field was like paying overtime every week just because they wanted to go to lunch and they wanted to take longer breaks and all of that. And it was crazy because if you added up all the numbers at the end of the year, which we did after we got the better accounting system, it was something around $150K.
Stop.
In a $5 million company. So, you buckle down on those things, but it's hard because if you don't have that, if you just have QuickBooks and you go to your field and you're like, hey, you guys aren't being efficient enough, but you can't tangibly say, hey, why did you work 60 hours this week when you were literally there for 40 or like 35 hours? That was it.
Yeah.
Right. If you have that data, it helps. And it helps people stay accountable because they know that you can see what they're doing. It's not to be micromanaging. It's just, we're trying to stay in business. I'm trying to keep you a job.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to make more profit. I'm just trying not to sink.
Yeah, like 1 hour from one individual on one site, and then even if you might have 5 sites and you've got that same hour is being utilized in the same culture of, well, we're usually allowed to head off early on a Friday, and so we finish at 4, but we clock out for 5. It's like, multiply that by 4, by 12. Yeah, multiply it again by 5 individuals that might be doing it. And, that's paying for somebody that could be in the office. That's, there's loads of it. I know, I'm a big fan of lean. And obviously we have a safety background, and I believe there's lean in safety as well as lean in everything else. I don't mean stripping out value. I mean lean to the point of what is value, where is the value, and what's the core value of the business and the core focus of the business. So why are we doing these things that don't add value to the business?
Right.
We don't probably do enough of taking our head out of the game and looking down and going, oh yeah, that was something we agreed 2 or 3 years ago, but now we look at it, it's like, that's actually after costing us a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a waste of time and money. It doesn't actually save us any people going home safely, right? It's just we document it this way because we've always done it this way. I hated that phrase.
No, I'm a big fan of it. So in terms of, I can see again, back to yourself, I love the operations, meeting the operations with a financial concept, and so give us some examples of with the current customers that you have. Give us some wins that you've made with them, in terms of you applying your model of financial and operational and inserting yourself into those companies. So give us some data, maybe, and not without sharing too much confidential information, but maybe it could be something like, you went in and you seen that they were hiring all their equipment, and then maybe you said to them, look, why don't we just lease this equipment and then flip it on after 5 years and stuff like that,
Yeah. The first thing I do is I try to look at what are your accounts receivable that are way too far out, right? When I started with the civil contractor, he had a AR that was 120 days out, but it was a time and material. So he didn't have it agreed upon. He had it all in writing, but they weren't paying it. So we took care of that, and he was behind $300,000 on a $2 million job, right? It's crazy what these general contractors will do. So immediately we hit those needs of what's the big pain point? And then once we balance all of that out, we start to put in the processes contract review. How do we do takeoff? Who are we ordering from? We negotiate deals and discounts with vendors that we do high volume with.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, what happened with the civil contractor, after a year and a half, we switched from QuickBooks over to a construction accounting software, so he could track how much fuel am I using, because he's a civil guy. He wants to know how much fuel, how much idle time are my equipment, are they being used right? Yeah. So we noticed one of his skid steers wasn't. We sold that and bought an excavator, one that would work for him with an RPO, so a rental purchase agreement. But what happened to him is he went from doing, this sounds horrible to some people, but we went from 6 million revenue to 3 million revenue. We didn't let go of anybody, but we doubled profit. So we went from 150,000 on 6 million to 300,000 on 3 million.
That's it.
And and that's really where the secret sauce is. It's the lean, like you said.
Less headaches. No drama. Yeah. No stress. No
same
trying
employees.
To firefight.
Yeah. So he was doing half the work. The same employees were being less burnout. I mean, there's things that are intangible that you can't even think about. Yeah. It's hard to imagine. But you have guys that aren't doing overtime. They get to go home every day to their families at 5 p.m. They don't have to work weekends. They don't have to do holidays. And they're making more money, so they get a bigger bonus at the end of the year. They can have nicer, newer equipment.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and that was just 1 year to the next. And then that sets you up. Hey, where do you want to spend this money? Do you want to use it on training and development or more equipment? We started thinking about your overhead is at 50% capacity, right? Because we've made it more efficient. So your 3 office people can now do $6 million worth of work, but instead of 300,000, we can make 600,000. So we need to hire you more field people. So that way, you see, we started strategizing. Who's our next hire? What are we going to do?
Yeah.
How are we going to build this out?
Yeah.
And it's blowing up. I told him in 5 years we could probably do 30 million.
Brilliant. So like, there's a lot of, shall we say, charlatans in the area of mentorship and coaching, and we've had some really good people on the show. Anybody that's listening, go back to some of the episodes. There's some brilliant people that we have that, go out and do this mentorship and coaching, but they actually live and, walk the walk with these business owners. And by you saying that, like, that's another, another validation for why we have you on the show, because you're taking the pain with the contractor, because obviously it's a massive risk for them to drop what they perceive as value in terms of revenue down to a lower value. Now, obviously, it may have implications for them on tenders that they don't have the capacity of a revenue output to allow them to tender for certain contracts. But that's irrelevant. If you're not putting money in your pocket, you're not going to survive.
You're not going to make it through the next recession, right? Because you're not going to be winning more projects. There's only going to be 100 instead of 1,000, and you're going to have to. You can't slim your margins anymore. But what happens with when you can make a double the profit, you can say, "Hey, I know I've been making an extra 5-10%. I'll just cut it 3%." The competition can't compete with that, and I'm still going to win all these jobs and stay in business and make profit.
Yeah, well, I suppose the biggest issue after that is labor. Get the right labor, hiring the right people, onboarding them.
Yeah, onboard them, and then you have to make sure you train them. Keep them fed. If they're hungry to learn, then keep them learning so they don't leave and find a place that will.
So in terms of your reach, do you just stick in one state, or are you thinking global? Are you thinking national? Or what way are you thinking your own business?
I'm wide open. I've worked with companies in Washington, D.C., South Carolina, Vancouver, Canada. In my training, because I created an online PM certification of everything I did as a project manager and why you do it. So that way, anybody who wants to take the initiative as a project manager, or if a company wants to have more continuing education and they don't have a training department, they can take that. I've had people in Ireland take it, Zimbabwe. I've had them in South America, in Mexico and Argentina, Canada.
Wow.
I mean, it's crazy. There was 30 countries the last I looked, along with the US, but so when you get to like the CFO and COO things, a lot of those have been in Canada and the US so far, but it's just business principles, and it's just what makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. You don't have to have a business degree to understand that the way the human dynamic of business, you just have to treat people well and then hold people accountable to what you sign up for in your contract.
So who's sitting on those courses? Is it project managers, or is it CEOs and managing directors, or is it people that want to get into project management, or who's your demographic?
So I have 3 levels. I have the beginner, which is like your assistant project manager and project engineer. It's built for those people that maybe they went to college, maybe they're coming from the field over, and they actually learn, how do I do my job? What are submittals? How do you review them? How do you read specs? How do you read the drawings? Things that they need to know that they didn't ever learn.
Yeah.
And then you have the intermediate course, which is for project managers. How do I write a change order? What do I look for in a contract when I'm reading through it? How do I read through the advanced part of specs instead of the overall when are submittals due, the general spec sections? You dive into, okay, in my electrical, here is where my switchgear is, and these are the approved vendors and things like that.
Yeah.
That way, when you're sending over your submittal, it's going to get approved. Time and material. We go through anything that a project manager touches, budgets, accounting. It's more basic accounting. And then the last one's the advanced construction manager and construction management class. And that's more for like division managers, senior project managers,
Regional
operations
manager.
managers.
Yeah.
People that they need to understand, instead of looking at it project specific, we look at finance as a division or 10 projects and how that looks for the whole company. And that really tees you up to become an executive, because now you're not thinking of it like, what's my job as a project manager? You're thinking of it, what's the goal of the company and how do all the people under me achieve that goal? Brilliant.
And you designed those courses yourself?
Yeah.
Well done. Kudos.
That was the first thing I did. I figured it was fresh in my mind. I wanted to make sure I got it all out there. And I use it with my COO and my CFO things. So just when I put in place those processes of this is where you save things, this is how you, like what we need to do. And I back it up with giving licenses to those. So that way your project engineer, maybe you hire somebody. Here, watch this 3-hour course that'll teach you everything I need you to do, and you'll understand why. And here's how you save it.
Brilliant. So it's an e-learning module that you basically designed yourself. So it's a plug and play.
Yeah. And if people want to take it outside of my services, it's a couple $100 per class and you're good to go. I wanted it to be reasonable. So if somebody wanted to do it on their own, do continuing education.
Yeah, it's accessible.
When I started project management, I Googled, what is a project manager? What do I do? Because I didn't have a background. I didn't know. Yeah. And there was no resources back in 2013 when I did that. So I made a resource because I wanted that when I was younger.
Yeah. And how do you advertise that through LinkedIn then, other than your direct customers?
So I do have it on LinkedIn. It's not something I actively promote anymore. It was what I was doing. Yeah. But if on my website, if you go there, there's a whole tab for e-learning. And I've taken and I've curated, those are the 3 courses I put in for project management and all construction management. But I've taken out some of the stuff in there and I've made like a business owner course for people that are running small businesses. And that goes over your contracts, your change orders, how to bill, schedule of values, things that maybe as a business owner, you haven't been taught because you're blue collar and you need to learn it, but you don't have to go through all of the construction management stuff because you understand how to read drawings, right?
That's brilliant. I love it. So most of your customers, you're obviously dealing at the CEO, MD level in terms of the initial conversations.
Yeah. When people reach out to me, CEOs, founders, principals, it's companies that are 1 million up to 50 million. Yeah. And the reason I say 50 million is because I've worked for some small subcontractors that are pretty efficient, but they didn't have the consistency. Typically though, 25 million and lower, like that is the bread and butter. We can put in place all of these processes and they have the capability then to triple their capacity just by doing these simple processes.
So are you able to set up like a budget and a forecasting model for them as well to say, look, I can now that I have a good understanding of where you're at and I've done the litmus test or the gap analysis.
Yeah.
I think you could probably push this dial up another 4 or 5 million, or as you said earlier on, I think you should dial it down and increase the net profit.
Yeah, of course. The first thing we do, I try to be an instant return on investment. So a fractional CFO is not super cheap, but it's like the cost of another laborer, right? Per month. Yeah. So the first thing I do, we look at those outstanding ARs. If you have 200,000 outstanding, I'm going to go collect those bills for you. Maybe you don't want to and you're afraid to. So if I can collect you 200,000, look, you've paid for me for 3 years. You don't even need, it's instantly impactful. Yeah. And then whatever I do on top of that is
You were going to collect that for them?
Yeah.
Wow.
I'll send the emails. I don't care. I'll be the bad guy. I'll send legal notices. It's easy. And I'll teach you how to do it. And that's one of the processes I build. So that way I don't have to be needed. My goal as a CFO isn't to have long-term clients forever. I want to help put in place those processes, teach how to read the financial things. And within 6 months to a year, depending on how big and how complex and how long the projects take, right? If you have a company that does 2-year projects. It's going to take us longer to get actual financial data.
Yeah.
But I want to like be in and be out where they can hire somebody full time.
Yeah. No, I love that. So you're not stripping out the value. You're there to add value to a point where you're no longer needed. You're probably doing yourself out of your own role, but that's the success that you've left.
Yeah. It's fun to go in times that people find it extremely stressful. You have a really great client and they just haven't paid you this $100,000 per change order or billing. It's so far behind. I can help alleviate that stress and then provide all the value so you never get in that situation again.
Okay, so probably the one thing that probably sticks out is people ringing you when it's too late and something catastrophic has happened and we need to get some expertise. What about that Josh guy that we, get him in here? Like, is it not a case of, oh, sorry, pal, the damage is done. You need to take the humble pie.
There's a chance for that. But even like when I started with a civil contractor, that's how it kind of started. It was, hey, how do I collect on this change order? Because that was how the conversation started. It wasn't, hey, come in and change processes and make all this happen for me.
Yeah.
So sat down, saw from my project management background, hey, here's your AR, here's the problem. You have the documentation. So let me give this a try. You're out of the legal side. I technically, by the state law in the state they were in, we can't do this. But so they might call our bluff and they might say, hey, you're too late. But there's a lot of, when you send an email to the executive of a company and you say, hey, here's my notice of intent to lien the project. And I'm going to let the owner know that you agreed to this. Here's the email back up. Here's all of this. And I'm expecting payment or I'm going to lien the project and walk off. There's a lot of leverage there. Even though they could have called our bluff and said, hey, you're past your lien date. You can't actually lien that.
Go for it, pal, and let's see where it brings you.
I go for it, and it's like, hey, if it's a no-go, I get it. But if it is, which it was, it turned out that we got paid all of it. That's kind of the risk is I can try, but when you walk in with the confidence of I'm going to do this, and then the other party's like, I've never had a legal notice. I don't know what to do with this. They're going to tell the owner. Then they typically shape up within a month.
Well done. Well done, Josh. So listen, let me throw a few curve balls at you because that's what we like to do here, just to get under the bonnet and see a little bit more about you, the person, Yeah. Knowing what you know now, what would you do different, Josh? And it can be business or personal.
Oh, man. What would I do different in business? Honestly, I kind of lucked out. What I would do different is trust what certain people told me early on. I put off getting my master electrical license for years. Yeah. And it was because people would tell me, oh, you don't need that. That doesn't matter. But it goes a long ways in now I can work for any company and help support them that's electrical. I can actually pull permits for them. I can be on staff and get them to a place that maybe they weren't licensed before, and I can help them get licensed.
Good call.
That's one of the major things.
But you have the master's now, no?
Yeah, I have my master electrical license in Alabama, which is that was something that I strategically did. I got it there because it works in 15 different states around there. You can get reciprocity. So I can go to Virginia, I can go to North Carolina, Tennessee, and instantly I can get my license. So that was super important to me.
A favorite book or movie?
Favorite book or movie? Man, I like the Book of Eli, the movie. It's just something about like the sci-fi mixed with a little bit of like Knights of the Templar kind of feel. It's just like cool.
A favorite holiday destination and why?
Oh man, we like to go to Mexico. We always have the philosophy there's two types of vacations. We can go to Europe, which we've gone to Greece and France and Germany, and go see all the historical things, and it's so fun. But you're always tired when you get home versus you go to Mexico to an all-inclusive. It's like It's cheaper than the US, first off. Like Disney World is 3 times more than going to Mexico for a week.
Yeah.
But everything's there. You show up anytime you want, get all the food you want. Somebody else cleans up everything.
Yeah.
You just be polite, tip them, and go on your way. And that's an amazing quality when you have 2 kids. You don't have to pick up everything.
100% agree with that. It's frictionless. Well, it's not completely frictionless, but there's less friction.
Yeah, exactly.
If you were advising somebody to go into construction, what would you advise them as? What would be your opening sentence to invite somebody into construction?
Get into the trades. Everybody wants to go to college and then get this awesome, cushy job as a general contractor. And it's hard to say it out loud, but there's a lot of disrespect for people that only have a degree and only sit in an office their whole career from the field. But if you go learn a trade, learn mechanical work, learn plumbing, electrical, telecom, anything, and you do 6 months to 3 years minimum in the field, and then you get into BIM, then you get into project management, then you get into something that actually helps. But if you can get your license in something, I can walk into a room with a general contractor. It doesn't matter if it's Google or Langley or Force Base or anybody, and I can say, I know electrical code. What do you know?
Yeah.
And maybe they know basic things, but they're not going to know. They're not going to understand how everything works. And you have a lot more authority.
A lot more authority, and it gives a lot more credibility on the table, and it takes those barriers down that the person might be feeling.
Yeah, and you can own a business. Like if you have your master electrical license or master plumbing, you can actually own the business versus anybody else who just goes to college. You can't own anything because you can't get your license.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that. Tell us something interesting about you, Josh. That obviously there's a lot interesting about you, but tell us something interesting that we wouldn't associate with you, or if, people wouldn't. Oh my God, I didn't know that about Josh.
One thing that I did when I was in college, I went to college. I got my 4-year degree, but it's in wildlife management. So I've worked at like a zoo for an internship, but then I actually fought wildfires for 3 years after college, before construction. So I was on a helicopter in Idaho and in Western US, and it's not military service, but it was kind of like my version of military service, because you're working for the Forest Service and the US government doing that kind of thing. And it's hard work. I worked 16-hour days for 3 weeks with 2 days off.
In harsh environments, in very harsh environments. Well, not as harsh as the guys that are on the ground.
Yeah. Yep. Camping out a lot.
Well, so you were in the helicopter, but you also had to stay local in camps, did you, when you were doing the firefighting?
Yeah. So the helicopter, we were initial attack. So in Idaho, you can't get everywhere on a road, or it might take forever because they're mountain roads that are 20 miles an hour or 40 kilometers per hour, something like that. Or maybe 10. I don't know how the math works. But so we would jump in the helicopter, fly to the place, land in a meadow. I would have to hike over while the helicopter dropped buckets on it. We'd have to go hike over to it and put it out ourselves on the ground while there was air support.
And now you're putting out fires for business owners in construction.
Yeah. I went from literal to figuratively.
Josh, it's been absolutely amazing having you on the Gaffer. I think you've great value to offer to people, and I think a lot of people will get a bit of inspiration, I think, if anything, from today's call, because the mixture of tactical, strategic and financial as one package, and the fact that you've said that you go in a way that you put your own shoulder to the wheel with the company, and that you have this life experience behind you. And, kudos to you for noticing that that's a niche, or niche, as you guys call it. But in Europe, it's a niche. And I think it's a great value, but it doesn't, as you said yourself, it doesn't stop in the States. Like, it's a global issue. So if people wanted to contact you, how would they get in contact with you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Josh Luebker. Luebker, or I have a YouTube channel that I'm starting to put out free content that helps. It's very high level. I can't get in detail with people's specific finances, but it gives you the framework of what you might be looking for, whether it's cash flow problems, whether it's hiring, whether it's an operations problem. And then my website, you can always go to, Sulphur Prairie Management. Just Google that and you'll find it.
We'll put it in the show notes anyway, Josh.
Yeah, there you go.
Listen, thanks very much for joining us, and we wish you the very best for the future and all your clients as well. And
thank you, sir.
Delighted that you're trying to de-risk
thank you for having
the
me,
industry.
Man.
Yeah, so keep it going, because the more people we can save in construction, the better and the more healthy construction will be for the future. So thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you for having me and bringing light to it.
All right, take care, Josh.
Take care.